everybody. Dr. Mary here, functional medicine doctor and founder of Modrn Med. I'm here with Mindy Black, and we are going to talk about all things performance, supplements, as well as exercise performance in elite athletes and your weekend warriors. So Mindy Black is an experienced registered dietitian, and she's located in Jacksonville, Florida. She specializes in sports nutrition and is currently the director of performance nutrition for the Jacksonville Jaguars. She is also closely related with a bunch of doctors in Jacksonville, as well as chiropractors, and she's an adjunct professor at the University of North Florida. Mindy graduated from University of Florida. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Yeah. And she has a bachelor's of science in human science and human nutrition and a master's in exercise physiology. So I was actually a Gator in undergraduate for a hot minute. I don't know if I told you that.
No, that's excellent.
Yeah, so I went there my first year, and then I ended up transferring back to University of Massachusetts. But I was in the same exact program, food science and nutrition. Yeah.
Very cool.
And so I brought you on because you deal with elite athletes. So you're dealing with the Jacksonville Jaguar team. And so I wanted to pick your brain about what things you guys have noticed work. And we're going to talk about nutrition. Macros are so popular right now. I'd like to dive in that as well, but let's just kind of start off with one of the most common trends right now. People have heard this topic, intermittent fasting. What are your thoughts on it? How does it affect workouts? Can we kind of deep dive into that?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, I think like anything that we'll probably talk about today, it's really so individualistic on what are your goals. So, when I talk about performance-based nutrition, it can be completely different if someone's really trying to maximize their glycogen loading for performance, or maybe they're trying to, increase their fat oxidation rate because they're trying to burn fat. So with intermittent fasting, it's been around for probably all of human history, I would imagine. And there's tons of proposed health benefits for the outside of athletics for the general population. There's a ton of great things that it can do. Unfortunately, with athletics, the only real studies that we have on human athletes are done right around our Ramadan athletes. So it's short term. It's if we want to see real benefits with intermittent fasting, you typically need to be doing it for more than 10 days. And most of the studies that are on human beings aren't adapted before they start testing on it. So the studies that they do have don't necessarily show any performance benefits from intermittent fasting. Now, that being said, they don't necessarily show any detriment either. So it's not like it's harming your performance. It just doesn't make you a better athlete because you're intermittent fasting. There was one study that showed a slight decrease in sprint times. So if you're someone that's really into high intensity workouts and you're really trying to maximize your performance, might not be the route to go. But for the rest of the population, as long as you are doing it correctly and you're fueling and you're getting enough calories in those windows, then it's not going to be a detriment to your workouts.
Yeah. And that makes sense too. So you mentioned a couple important things. One of them, glycogen loading versus like fat oxidation, right? And so for people listening, glycogen loading, we talk about it in terms of like carb loading before, which we can discuss that as well. But that's really to power you so that you have excess fuels kind of stored in the bank. Whereas breaking down fat mass and increasing fat metabolism, you're losing weight. So one of them is anabolic and one of them is catabolic. And typically you don't see those together. So you kind of have to like pick your goal, like you were saying, like what is your goal? Do you want to lose fat or do you want to gain muscle and really go for long, like distance kind of thing? So it's super important. And I think intermittent fasting is interesting because it kind of mimics evolutionarily like what we're designed as humans. Like we didn't wake up with a refrigerator. We woke up, we had no food, we had to go find it. So there was that gap in the wake up period and then the consumption of food. What we get set back in evolutionary sciences is just because we evolved that way doesn't mean it's like the best for performance too. So we kind of have to weigh and benefit risks and benefits as to what's going to help performance, but also kind of what are we designed as humans.
Absolutely. And we definitely have to look at, what your goals are, but also like what's your intensity, how long are you working out, all of those things are factors that go into whether or not that would be right for you. Because, it takes to have peak performance from your carbohydrates, it's going to take 70 minutes or so for it to kick in. So if you're having carbohydrates right before workout, but you're only working out for 30 minutes, that's not necessarily helping you with your glycogen at that point. So, you just kind of have to keep in mind whatever your goals are, and with nutrient time and everything else, is this actually benefiting me, or is this just kind of the standardized protocol that I read somewhere kind of thing?
Yeah. Can you slow down and break that down one more time? Because I think you just said something really important about the 70 versus the time you're working out.
So yeah, so when we talk about carb loading and things like that for performance benefits, but you have to think it takes a certain amount of time for carbohydrates to break down into your system. So the ultimate, or the studies show the best way to have carbohydrates in your system for glycogen loading is that 4 hours beforehand, you would have 4 to 5 grams per kilo of your weight ingested. Now, that's great in a perfect world that's in a lab, but if you're working out at 6 a.m. or 8 a.m., I don't know if waking up at 2 a.m. to have your carb load is going to benefit you more than it's going to hurt you, because you just lost all of that sleep. So, we kind of have because of GI distress, we kind of say you can really typically do 1 gram per kilo of your body weight per hour out from what your workout is. So if you're working out at 8 and you're eating at 7, you can have about 1 gram per kilo. If it's 2 hours and you have 2, a lot of people get that stuck in their head and they think they need all these carbohydrates right beforehand. But if you are working out less than 45 minutes, you're not going to see those carbohydrates benefit that particular workout. Now, if you're doing 2 days, you'll see it a little bit later on. But as far as if you're trying to benefit that particular workout and you're trying to give yourself glycogen to that, and you can't do it 4 hours beforehand, you may need to load the night before, because you're definitely not going to be getting whatever you just consumed 30 minutes before you worked out. It's not going to be broken down into your system for fuel enough to get you through, a 2-hour workout. So if you're doing 90 minutes or more, then absolutely that hour beforehand is going to kick in and benefit you in that latter part of your workout. But if you're doing a 30-minute workout, it's not going to benefit you.
Yeah. Which we don't talk about that, but it's so important. Like, you could be consuming extra calories, especially if you're trying to lean out and things like that. You're consuming extra calories and you're also just not benefiting performance wise. And getting back to your first point, like, is your goal performance enhancement? Is your goal like getting a faster time, or, a PR on a lift or something like that? Is it aerobic? Is it anaerobic? Like, these are all things we have to take into consideration, because they're going to change which fuel source and when you're going to consume it.
Absolutely.
And so let's talk about carbs, because we started with that. But what are your recommendations? We can talk about athletes and then non-athletes. Like, how do you know how many carbs, protein, kind of fat? Like, how do you take clients through this?
So the first thing, regardless if you're an athlete or not, everybody kind of starts with the same equation. Basically, we figure out what your resting metabolic rate is. And you can do this either by doing an equation online, just Googling resting metabolic rate, or you can go in and you can be tested where they test your oxygen, your CO2 to see how many calories you burn at rest. Now that might come up as 1,200 or 1,600 or whatever it is, but that means that's how many calories your body requires if you're laying in bed all day long and doing nothing. So that's what your body needs for your heart to beat, your lungs to breathe, and all that good stuff. So that's kind of our base level. Now, if you're a non-athlete and you're not doing much, we would multiply an activity factor to that would be closer to like a 1.2 or 1.3, meaning you might be walking around, you might be doing things, but we're not really physically active. Whereas some of my athletes that are doing 2-a-days, we would actually multiply that number by 1.9. So depending on how active you are, you'll kind of multiply an activity factor. And that's kind of your base of, okay, this is what I need to maintain my output. And that's maintained. So once again, if you have goals of weight loss, then you're not going to eat all of those calories. But if you're someone that's trying to increase your lean mass, or if you're performance based, we absolutely have to get those calories in. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for not as good performances and possible injuries and things like that. But then that's when you can kind of look at the macros and we can say, okay, how many carbs do we need? And that is where it does start to decipher, depending on if you're an athlete or not and what kind of athlete you're at. So they kind of recommend for athletes, if you're a strength and a power type athlete, you would aim for 6 to 7 grams of carbohydrate per kilo to be coming from that bank. Whereas if you're someone that's an endurance athlete, you might need up to 10 grams per kilo. Ultra endurance, they're showing people doing 10 to 12 grams per kilo, which I know for a lot of your audience probably seems like insane amounts. And it really is a lot. We have seen some endurance athletes do just fine off 3 to 5, so very low carbohydrate diet. unfortunately, science-wise, we don't have enough research out there currently to really back that up. We see the anecdotal, oh yeah, I ran my best race, or I did really great on these low carb diets, but we don't see it in the science quite yet. We've seen it in rats, but we haven't seen it in the humans quite yet. But that's kind of the range for most people. If you're someone that's not an athlete, 4 to 5 grams per kilo would be reasonable. And like I said, 3 to 5 if you're really not doing anything is reasonable as well. And then once you get your carbs, then we can look at your protein and how much you need for protein, and that kind of differs as well. So if you're someone that's strength trained and you're trying to gain your lean body mass, a lot of us think, oh, more protein is better. Not necessarily the truth. So if you're leaving your weight workout and you're having a protein shake and you're going straight to have a 28-ounce steak, that could be overkill. Our body can only absorb so much at one time. So you could be actually promoting fat instead of lean muscle gain. So really the most we've seen benefits in 2 grams per kilo, even if you're trying to gain mass. Any more than that, we're not really seeing any more gains than if you cut to that 2 grams. Whereas if you're someone that's like an endurance trained athlete, you only need 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilo. So that's where it kind of varies there. The average American that's sitting at a desk all day, 0.8. So, so that's where, you know, your calories might be the same as an athlete, but depending on what your activity level is, that's where it's going to change those macros up a little bit.
Yeah. And for people listening, your weight in kilograms is about half your weight in pounds, right? Just it's 2.2, but just a rough estimate. So I did a quick little math equation for what you said, because you were saying about 12 grams per kilo for extreme endurance, right?
For our ultra endurance guys.
Yeah, it's coming out to about 900 grams, right?
Yes.
Like that's like jaw to the ground. Like that ain't keto by any means. I mean, keto, we're talking about like 30, right? Just to put everything into perspective. And we're talking about like 900 plus grams of protein for a 180 pound person, which I'm guessing, you know, I don't know their weights like actually at all, but I think they're probably.
And that's throughout the day. And that's for, you know, if you're doing an ultra endurance event, that's not like, you know,
on a daily basis,
sitting around on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, you're doing like Tour de France training there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and there have been a couple Tour de France athletes that have gone keto. I don't know whether they do it during the race days though. That's what I haven't been able to figure out, because I think the way people have described it is I feel like they were keto leading up, like training almost, and then race day, I'm not sure if they're keto. Have you heard anything about that?
And I haven't heard specifically on the Tour de France. I do know that there is, you know, the theory of train low and then perform high on your carbs. So far, once again, studies aren't showing a benefit for that. But once again, you know, everybody's individual. So if you decided in your off season to try it out and you're like, wow, I really like how this is, then it works for you. It just, unfortunately, it does take a little while to become, it takes about 2 months to become fat adaptive. And so if you're doing keto during the week, but on the weekends you're cheating, then we're not going to actually ever see that true adaptation if you're trying to do it for performance reasons.
Yeah, you got to put in the time and get there. And then we do blood sticks. So I have some clients on keto, but so we're doing like blood measurements to actually see, are you in ketosis or not? So you can actually measure your ketones in your blood, beta hydroxybutyrate, and really get some accurate measurements. Because sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, I'm in ketosis, I didn't eat any carbs today, but it's very subjective. So we want some objective measurements. We got any Jaguars that are keto?
We have a few that, once again, they'll do it in the off season and then they switch over, which I haven't seen any studies showing that there's a benefit for that, but they enjoy it in the off season. They enjoy being able to kind of better control their body composition and things like that. And then once the season comes, especially down here in Florida, in August in Florida, it's 110 degrees every day. So you run through carbohydrates more in the heat. And so in August, we generally are really pressing, this is not the time to be keto unless you are truly adaptive and you've been doing it for 6 months and you haven't been cheating every weekend kind of thing.
Yeah, but your body.
We have noticed the guys, we've had a few really stay strong with it in a couple years past, and we did notice their performance didn't necessarily decrease, but their perceived exertion was increased. So they were performing at the same level, but if you ask them how hard was today's workout on a scale of 1 to 10, when everybody else thinks it's an 8, they think it's a 10 or a 12.
Interesting.
And so that part we have noticed that as long as you're mentally tough enough to go past that, a lot of them did complain about thinking the workouts were way harder than they actually were.
Yeah, yeah. And were they using exogenous ketones at all? I wonder if that would make any
They were during it.
Yeah.
I think it's football in Florida is a whole nother bear. I think if it's a weekend warrior, you could probably get away with it, but they're out there 4 or 5 hours, and it's just hard to keep up in general with how many calories they need, much less if you're doing it on keto active way.
Yeah, and it's hot and humid.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, glycogen is going to help you store water as well. So I don't know if that, translates at all, but that's interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
What are your thoughts on ketone salts, exogenous ketones for performance? Even if you're not keto, have you thought about that at all in terms of just using them?
So yeah, even if you're not keto, I think the misconception is, oh, I can just do this and I don't have to change my diet and I'm going to see all these wonderful benefits. And that's not necessarily the case. But definitely for those that are just starting out on keto, I think it absolutely helps in the beginning, just in the sense of A, getting over the keto flu, but also B, that first week or two when you're just not used to not having sugar. I think it does help with the energy levels and things like that. I have had a few athletes not be keto but do it, and they do say they have more energy during their workouts. So as long as it's not harming them, I have no problem with them doing that kind of thing. You're right, you did mention the hydration part. Like when we cut out the carbohydrates hold 3 to 4 grams of water per gram of carbohydrates. So definitely there's more need for salt for the athletes that are going keto, because you're not going to be holding in as many electrolytes as you normally would.
Yeah. So exogenous electrolytes become more important, just hydration in general. But yeah, keto is a great diuretic. Like if I have people holding a lot of water weight, especially if we're just doing like a photo shoot or like short amount of time, like it's pretty proven that you cut carbs, you'll lose weight, but just not to assume that you just lost 3 pounds of fat. You just lost 3 pounds of water, and it's going to come right back. So that's why it's not a solution, but sometimes it can be.
That's the biggest misconception I think a lot of people have. I have a lot of clients say, oh, if I look at a piece of bread, I gain 10 pounds or whatnot. And it's like, well, no, if you're used to not eating carbohydrates and then all of a sudden you eat carbohydrate, you're now holding on to water weight. You can't physically gain 5 pounds of fat overnight. It's not going to happen. So just because you had, some great sandwich the night before or something like that doesn't mean you gained 5 pounds of fat, but you definitely are holding on to more water until you lose that part again.
Yeah. And that's why weighing yourself every single day is not a great, I don't know, I'm guessing you guys are the same way, but it's like, it's not useful because it's not a measure of fat mass changing. It's a measure of water shifting and all of this stuff. So I'm much more
just really mentally defeats you.
Totally.
Have to.
Yeah. And weight, I mean, there's so many different things, right? Performance is different, but weight loss, people think it should be a decline. Like you're losing like weight like this. Weight loss, ideally in my mind, is like you lose weight, you gain a little, but then you lose more, then you gain a little, but then you lose more. Absolutely. It's a zigzag pattern. And that's, I think, the healthiest way to lose weight.
100%, especially if you lose weight steadily down, it's usually a drastic diet, and it's usually decreasing that RMR that we just talked about. So it's decreasing how many calories you burn in general. Whereas if you do have that slower, hey, I might have went up today, but then I'm down 2-3 days from now kind of thing, that means your metabolism is actually adjusting. So you're keeping that RMR at a higher rate to where it's not going to be, once you do get to your goal weight, that you're so low calories that you have to stay there forever.
Yeah. Just like there's intermittent fasting, there's intermittent caloric restriction too. And I'm much more a fan of that, like kind of fluctuating. We mentioned it before, but you were saying off-season keto. That actually makes sense to me. It's this whole idea of like, if you're going to reduce calories, then exercise has to reduce too, unless if you do it too long-term RMR, like you're going to destroy your metabolism. But yeah, like doing cyclical keto makes more sense to me than long-term. If you have diabetes or epilepsy, I get like that there's different protocols for different things, but in terms of just like performance and weight loss and optimal, like feeling good and longevity, I think cyclical, almost everything is a better option a lot of the time. We got your screensaver for a second. Awesome. Okay. So what do you think about okay. What is it? Forks Over Knives? Is that what came out? No, what was the other one? Another documentary came out that was talking about vegetarian, vegan in performance athletes. Oh my gosh. Do you know the documentary I mean? Oh, we might have lost some audio. I'm gonna chat a little bit about it because there's a documentary that was recently released, and I can't believe the name is fleeting me, but basically they were talking about vegetarian and vegan diets for optimal performance. And so I'm interested on what Mindy's take is. If we have any Jaguars that are vegetarian, vegan, and how you think that that can incorporate into like a really effective performance way and optimizing either, you know, personal gains in the gym or just times or things like that.
We do have a few vegan and vegetarian athletes, and absolutely, if you're an athlete, can you be vegan or vegetarian? 100%. Does that mean that if you are vegan or vegetarian, it's going to make you a better athlete? Not necessarily. A few benefits to being vegan or vegetarian as far as athletes go is if we're cutting out our meat source proteins, you're more than likely adding back the calories with carbohydrates. And so a lot of athletes, especially if they were already calorically deprived, if they go on this diet, they will say that they feel more energy for their practices because they're eating more carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Also, they're increasing their fruits and vegetables tremendously usually. So they're going to have the benefits of diets that are rich in fruit and vegetables. So they're going to have, you know, decreased oxidative stress and inflammation and better endothelial functions and things like that. So there are positive benefits to it. With the athletes I work with, because so many of them need 5,000 to 7,000 calories, it's a lot to take on, especially if there's someone that's a picky eater already. So it can be done, but it definitely should be done with the help of a registered dietitian just to make sure you're getting in all the calories that you need. Because I've had a lot of athletes say, oh, I'm going to go vegetarian. And to them, that just means they're eating spaghetti all the time.
Mm-hmm. Carbitarian.
Exactly. And that's not quite what the goal is. So working with them, I really, you know, kind of make them look at their protein intake, because we 100% can get the protein through vegetables that we need, but the bioavailability of vegetable protein is so much less than animal protein that it is more of just an education of showing them, even if we're counting it, if you're having 60 grams of protein, a lot of dietitians only count that as about half because you're not absorbing as much. So we need to make sure we're getting in your needs. We also need to look at vitamins like vitamin B12 and vitamin D, omega-3s, certain foods. When you're cutting out different, you know, meat proteins, you're going to be lacking in certain nutrients. So we just need to make sure we're either getting those through foods or we're taking a supplement to make sure we're getting those in so that we don't subject them for the guys that I've had that don't want help and they just think they can do it generally end up injured. And that's one thing with the game changers. They had a few, I wish they had went a different route because they could have made a really good documentary, but so many of the things they did were kind of just showing one side or being very extreme. So, you know, they showed this fighter beat Colin, but they didn't mention that Colin had to reduce his weight by, I forget how many pounds, but something ridiculous to be able to fight in that weight class over 2 weeks. So he's not going to perform his best. They also didn't mention that Colin came back and beat him a month later. So there is that. They also, they kind of showed all the Titans that had went vegetarian or vegan, and that was all true. However, they kind of tied it to the Titans doing really well this year. Well, that was back in 2016. So those guys aren't even on that team now. So it's, you know, they took little things and they were X plus Y equals ABC kind of thing. It was a stretch, which I thought they could have done a little bit better as far as there are plenty of studies showing it can be beneficial, so they should have highlighted those more.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing with documentaries. I always tell people that documentaries are telling a side of the story. There's always the other side of the story. So we kind of use logical reasoning as well as what we know about the sciences to kind of piece together everything. But it was interesting, but I do agree. I think it totally can be done. You know, people ask me, can I heal my gut being vegetarian? Absolutely. We just have to be careful about the things that you're most likely, especially like a woman going vegan. Like we have to be worried about anemia, which is even common for non-vegan women. But B12 deficiencies are actually very common.
Yes.
And not just deficiencies, but in functional medicine, we talk about suboptimal. And I really like B12 above 600 for most people. So, you know, I think the lab ranges are anywhere from the mid 2s up to 900, but there's a big gap as to, okay, if you're at, 300, I still don't consider that optimal, especially if we're going for performance and longevity.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all of those, almost all of our vitamin numbers are based on not having scurvy, not being healthy, but just not being sick.
Right.
So if we're talking about numbers of the optimal performance and optimal healthiness, then absolutely your numbers need to be higher than that minimal level.
Yeah. So scurvy is vitamin C deficiency, and then you have rickets for vitamin D, right? So some of the lower limits of vitamin D, they're changing them now, but it's like, okay, so you're not going to get rickets. Like, is that our goal, or are we looking for prevention of breast cancer and prevention of all the other cancers we know vitamin D has? And for those, we're looking closer to the 40 to 70 range. We're not looking at even 30s.
Yeah, and with vitamin D, like we've noticed, like the NFL has numbers, and you're at higher risk for injury if you have low vitamin D numbers. And it's not deficiency; it's just low vitamin D. So we test in the NFL for vitamin D, and we're supplementing them. And it's amazing how I would say majority of people are vitamin D deficient, even down here in Florida when we're in the sun every day.
Yeah, almost more so in places like Florida, because it gets so hot, people stay inside. So when it's like Arizona in the summer or Florida, because I have clients there, and I'm like, you actually had an increased risk because you're avoiding the sun because it's too unbearable most of the time. And then darker skinned individuals have a very high incidence of D deficiency because they absorb less through the skin as well. Okay, where are we going to go? I think we should talk about hydration. How do we know if you're hydrated? How do you calculate how much you need to be drinking? What do you tell your Jaguars?
So dehydration of just 2% actually has been shown to decrease performance and cognitive functioning. So we are very big with the Jaguars on, especially in the preseason, we do weigh-ins, weigh-outs. We actually test their urine through USG testing to see where their specific gravity is. If you don't have all of those things, you can still tell if you're hydrated or not. So the easiest way I would say you could tell is if you're urinating every 90 minutes or so, and it's the color of lemonade or lighter, then you're hydrated. If you're only going once or twice a day and it's the color apple juice, then you're dehydrated.
Yep.
And then the key thing, once you realize you're dehydrated, is, okay, well, how much do I need? And so kind of the universal kind of saying is, take your body weight and divide it by half. And that's what we start out with. And then after that,
in ounces.
however many, in ounces. So if you weighed, 200 pounds, then you need 100 ounces of water a day. And from that, if you're someone that's working out on a regular basis and you notice if you weighed in before practice and you weighed in after practice and you lost 6 pounds, then for each one of those pounds that you lose, we need to replace it with 20 ounces of fluid.
Okay, 20 ounces
and that's kind of
lost.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the standard, but then everybody's a little bit different. So if you're somebody that's a really heavy sweater, like I have some linemen that lose 20 pounds at practice, and it would be almost impossible to have them sit down and drink that much fluid before the next practice. So you kind of have to see, okay, am I losing, because we're not just losing water, we're losing electrolytes too. And we had mentioned earlier the carbohydrate factor, the carbohydrates hold water in it. So if you know that you're cramping up or you're having heat illness symptoms or you just can't seem to feel right after workouts and you think it's a hydration issue, you may be getting all the fluid you need, but you might not be getting the electrolytes, or you may be getting the electrolytes, but not the carbohydrates to hold that fluid in. So if you're somebody that's a heavy sweater and you're losing 6, 10, 12 pounds at practice, it may be that you're just not, you don't have the carbs to hold that water in, and you're going through a lot more than what others are. Same thing with salty sweaters. You generally will lose anywhere from 400 to 700 milligrams of sodium per pound that you lose of water weight. Now, some people are on that really high end, and we have sweat testing here at the Jaguars, so we'll actually find out exactly what they need. But if you don't have access to that, you can kind of tell, like if you always have white lines on your baseball caps or on your shorts, or if you can go like this after a workout and it just feels like salt, then you're a salty sweater, and you probably are going to need to increase your electrolyte intake more than others that can get away with just doing water during practice.
Yeah. And besides salt, like obviously you can add salt to your water, but what are your favorite electrolytes? Do you have brands that you like? Where does Gatorade fall into all of this, if it does fall into it?
So we do, at the NFL, we are a Gatorade company. So we definitely have Gatorade. We have something called Gatorlights that are actually just the electrolytes. So it's sodium, magnesium, potassium, in a powder. It just basically tastes like pure seawater once you mix it into water or Gatorade or whatever else. We have something called the right stuff that NASA invented, and it's more of a liquid form, but it's pure electrolytes. And then there's things like Noon caplets and things like that. It just really depends, once again, what your goals are. So some people only need the electrolytes. They're doing great otherwise. And if that's the case, then the caplets would be okay, or the powder would be okay. But there's others that truly need carbohydrates too, because the whole point that Gatorade started with was that they noticed that we absorb our water and it sticks with us a lot better if it's combined with 6 to 8% carbohydrates. So that's the entire reason it was invented. It wasn't invented to sit and drink Gatorade while playing Xbox. It was supposed to be for the field. But you can always make healthier Gatorades without all the additives that Gatorade does. But if you're doing just the electrolytes and you're not adding the carbohydrate, then and you're still having problems, then you may need to add that carbohydrate so that you can actually keep that water in during the workouts.
Yeah. And we always have to get back, what is the goal? Because you have like the highest end athletes, right? And they're burning 1 million calories. So is Gatorade going to put them into a diabetic state? No, they're absorbing it. They're using it the next day or the next practice the same day. So that's where, like, we always put a blanket statement, Gatorade is horrible. Not necessarily. Like, it depends what your goal is. And like you said, you could do a healthier alternative, but sugar in general, yeah, we want to minimize it. But when you're using it immediately for fuel, we're not as concerned about it versus like the Xbox players that you mentioned. So it's a good
Absolutely. Point. And so, like, I'm talking football, but if you're doing a marathon or a half marathon and you're running for over 2 hours, it doesn't have to be Gatorade, but you're going to need some carbohydrates on that route. So whether that's through a Gatorade or through chews or something else, you need those carbohydrates to keep you going.
Yeah. Do you need them in a 40-minute workout?
No.
Probably not. So we're talking about like 90 minutes longer, then we're starting to recruit it if performance, and that is our goal too. If you're trying to lose weight, I mean, the hydration always needs to be there, but good points. Do you have a recipe that you like for a healthy Gatorade option?
I have a couple of them actually, and it really depends on people's, like one that I use that a lot of our guys like has tart cherry juice. But a lot of people don't like that taste of tart cherry juice. So the one I have, we use, if you're doing like an 8-ounce drink, it'd be 2 ounces of tart cherry juice with 6 ounces of water. You just mix that together, and then you do like a 16th teaspoon of salt. And then some kind of sugar. So whether that be agave or whatnot, but just, a teaspoon of sugar just to get the carbohydrates in there and mix that together. That's a popular one. If they don't like that, we've done watermelon, kind of same ratios, but with watermelon juice and coconut water. And that way you can kind of get the electrolytes in there and it tastes a little bit better than just plain coconut water.
Yeah. Oh, those are good. I like those.
Yeah.
Awesome. And mention again the one that you guys use for electrolytes, right?
Right stuff, RIGHT stuff. And it comes in like a little packet like this big. And once again, it tastes like flavored salt water, but it is a little more, to me, it's more palatable than just the powder. The powder you are supposed to pour into like a bottle of water or Gatorade or something like that. But most of our athletes, they're in a rush and they just open up, do it, and they'll drink their water on their way to meetings or things like that. But the right stuff, I feel, tastes a little bit better.
Okay, I'm gonna look into it.
And they do have, so the right stuff and Gatorlytes and Noon, they all have slightly different breakdowns of how much sodium and how much potassium and things like that. So if you have access to sweat testing and you do notice that you lose a lot of sodium, one might be better for you than the others.
Yeah. And I want to circle back. You had mentioned specific gravity testing for the urine. CVS, like you can get urinalysis strips places. So it's not something that you couldn't do at home by yourself. I'm not sure the UA ones at CVS, I think they measure specific gravity. The ones we use in medicine, you always get a specific gravity measurement, but I'm sure you can get them over the counter because it's not
you should be able to get them over the counter. You can also, unless you're taking a vitamin that's turning the color of your pee a weird orange or yellow, honestly, like I've done so many USG tests that it's pretty clear. Like if it's lemonade or lighter, then you're good to go. If it's apple juice without doing a strip, hey, I got some work to do.
Yeah, and the every 90 minutes thing, I need to get on that because sometimes I'm going a little longer.
That's the annoying part if you're trying to work, but it is truly where you can tell if you're hydrated or not. If you did that equation and you're going every 30 minutes, then by all means cut back some. You don't need to be urinating every 30 minutes.
I'm
every
being
90 minutes is about
podcast and being like, okay, 1 second.
Yes.
Awesome. But I want to go back in. You mentioned tart cherry juice. Let's kind of go into some supplements, especially ones that you use with any of the athletes that you work with. What are your favorites, and if any mechanisms of action, how they work?
Yeah. So if we're talking about DOMS or delayed onset muscle soreness, absolutely we'll do tart cherry juice, which about 10 to 12 ounces after a workout is what we can kind of aim for for our guys, because they need more calories than just 10 to 12 ounces. We actually turn that into a recovery shake that will have a 3 or a 4 to 1 ratio of carbs to protein, so that we can get all the stuff that they need in there, the branched chain amino acids and all that stuff. We also use a lot of turmeric and garlic and other anti-inflammatory herbs and spices to help reduce that inflammation and muscle soreness. And then we have seen that BCAAs or branched chain amino acids can help reduce that muscle soreness as well. So those are kind of the big ones that we use for that. Is the newer one that's out is they've done studies and they show that gelatin plus vitamin C can actually help rebuild your cartilage. So any of our guys that are going through rehab, or if they just had ACL surgery or anything like that, then 30 to 60 minutes before any of their rehab or workouts, we're making them take, we do it we kind of make a jello, but they actually sell powders that you can just throw in it that have vitamin C and gelatin now, because the studies are so concrete that they work. So people are just buying the powder and throwing it in water or whatnot and doing that right before workouts. And that's been really beneficial for some of our aging out guys that are trying to maintain as long as they can.
If you're eating the jello, you're embarrassed, basically.
Pretty much.
So the gelatin and vitamin C, we're talking about collagen production. So we're not talking about muscle soreness. We're talking about collagen in the joints. So like osteoarthritis, kind of like the joint on joint, bone on bone arthritis that people get, especially athletes with overuse.
And the studies that keep coming out, it's about 15 grams of gelatin with just your RDA of vitamin C. And it tends to be really, really helpful, especially for those that already have issues. The newest one that we're kind of playing with, because we didn't have our normal off season. We weren't able to practice like we normally were. So we're preparing for guys to come in. Some of them will be in excellent shape. Some of them will have not done anything since January. So talking to a lot of the guys that do these studies, Keith Barr and a couple other people, they're saying that they really feel like if we do this, if you're just getting into a new type of workout, even if you don't have joint pain, if you do this 30 to 60 minutes out, that it's going to help reduce your risk for injury. Because if you haven't been, especially if you've been sitting at a desk because of COVID and your hamstrings get tight and everything else, and you go out and try to do a new movement, you're going to be at a much higher risk because your cartilage it's not elastic right now. So they're finding that it helps get back into the swing of things as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I had no idea about that. That's why I love doing
awesome.
that.
Yay.
What about beet powder? Beet Elite is one of the companies. There's a bunch of them out there. What are your thoughts on beet powder?
So beet powder works for probably half the population, but you want to take it beforehand, and it's basically just benefiting your nitric oxide in your body. And so we have some guys that swear by it and feel like they take it 45 minutes or so before their workouts, and beet Elite is a big one that we'll use. And they really feel a difference getting through their workouts. We actually juice beet juice as well. We'll usually cut it with pineapple or something else just so it's a little more palatable. But we do that pre-workouts as well to kind of help increase some of the nitrates that are in their body to help out.
Yeah. So nitric oxide, we naturally produce it in our endothelial linings, but it helps dilation. So it's a vasodilator, which can help with blood flow to your muscles. So that's kind of one mechanism that, beets will help stimulate and possible performance enhancers. But yeah, I like the taste of it too.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad at all. They've made it taste really good. If you are using a beet Elite or one of the little packets, I would say just, once again, evaluate your body size. Our 300-pound linemen, they need 2. it's not going to be enough just for one. But if you're, 100, 120 pound runner, then absolutely one packet could be plenty.
Right. Yeah. And how does somebody choose a protein for them? Do you have favorite proteins? Like, let's go through maybe people that are trying to build, so like your CrossFit athletes or your Jaguars or whoever it is, like what's the best protein for muscle building?
So for muscle building, your best proteins will be your whey proteins. And they're really finding leucine is the key element if you want to gain lean mass. So anything that's going to have leucine in it, whether it be a branched chain amino acid or a whey protein, which has all your branched chain amino acids in it already, or literally if you're a food first person and if you want to go have a piece of chicken or a steak or whatnot within that 30-minute window right afterwards, then you're going to get those branched chain amino acids. Brands that I really like brands that get third-party tested, number one. So just I'm sure you know, but the supplement industry out there, I can make a supplement tomorrow and I can put it on the shelf, and until a couple hundred people die, it's on that shelf. So I always recommend whatever you get, make sure it's third-party tested, and it tells you who that third party is. Because there's a lot of them will put like a sticker, third-party tested, but then you go on their website and really search around, and it's like their company that's testing it. So
and we look for NSF. NSF's a big one. NSF, you can be an Olympic athlete and you can use an NSF supplement, right? Same with Pro. And then GMP is another good one to look for. Do you have any other certs that you look at?
Informed Choice is the other one. So Informed Choice, if you're Olympics, usually you can use that one. The NFL, we have to be NSF. But Informed Choice, NCAA, and all those will support that one. So those are three great ones that you can absolutely use. Yeah. And then once you do that, it's more personal, like what you like, what you don't like. But I always say the less ingredients, the better. So if you're looking at whey protein, so if you're looking at the ingredient list and there's 32 more things besides whey protein listed in there, most of those are fillers. So you're not getting as much whey protein as you think you are. So just kind of keep that in mind. You really should have only a few ingredients in there if you're going that route. I really like Garden of Life as a brand. It actually still tastes good and it's a quality product. But yeah, if you're trying to lift, whey protein would be the way to go. If you're, trying to just maintain weight and you're really struggling keeping weight on, then maybe doing a casein at night will help, because the casein it's a slower release, so it can help you not rehab, but regenerate throughout the night, kind of thing. And then if you're vegetarian or vegan, I like Garden of Life again. I like Vega Sport. They both have good proteins that have a mix. I always say just have a mix, because if it's just pea protein or if it's just one type of vegan protein, then you're not going to get your full round of amino acids that you need.
Yeah. So you can mix and match them. You could also just, depending on the day, you could do that if you're not looking for gains, but are more just kind of everyday maintenance. Yeah, I like that.
And then if you're someone that is injured or has a history of injuries, there's a brand out there. It's a smaller brand. You can get it online, but it is third-party tested. It's called Mend, and it does include glucosamine and a few other things that will help. It has a probiotic in there and things like that will help overall with those that are degenerative and having more issues than others.
Yeah, so glucosamine is another great supplement for joint health. Chondroitin's another one. The gelatin, we now know, is a great one. I mean, that makes gelatin is cartilage, right? So you're consuming the building blocks. So yeah, those are all great. And then we talked about BCAAs. Do you like them timing wise before a workout? What's your favorite? BCAAs are branched chain amino acids, so there's specific ones. But from my research, it's been on fatigue prevention, especially like centralized fatigue. Anything on that?
Yeah, so with BCAAs, you can take them before, during, or after. And so once again, it's kind of what your goals are. We used to, as dietitians, sports dietitians, we used to preach like carbs before workouts, proteins after. But now what we're realizing is even if it's that leucine and it's the branched chain amino acids that are really beneficial. And even if you had it before, you're still going to see benefits as far as gaining your lean body mass. So if you're having it after, that's completely fine. But if you're looking for, if you're feeling like you're hitting a wall during workouts, BCAAs may help because it is an energy source. So having it beforehand or during may help extend your workouts a little bit more. If you're doing it beforehand, it's absolutely going to still benefit you afterwards. So it's something that you can include into your pre-workout fuel, and that would be okay as well. The biggest thing is making sure that there's leucine in it, and making sure that you're getting, once again, it's a kilo thing, but 0.1 to 0.2 grams per kilo overall, which is pretty easy to get.
Yeah. Okay. 0.1 to 0.2. So it's not a ton, but it's grams per kilo for the BCAAs specifically. Yeah. I had a runner. She was more of an elite runner. She had a history as being an elite runner. She was a little bit older when I measured her, but we have this new test that it looks at amino acids in the blood. And I have to look to see if it's cellular or if it's serum, because that actually changes things. It gives you information either way, but it's either circulating or what's in your cellular level. And she only came up low on leucine, which I thought was interesting because it made sense in terms of her being a very aerobic, like long performance athlete. So I was like, that's actually kind of interesting. And we target it. We're just giving her BCAAs to see if we can, enhance her times or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. We always talk about your main fuel is carbohydrates, and you'll use carbohydrates and you'll use fat depending on what your intensity level is. But 2 to 5% of what you use for fuel is protein, regardless of what your diet is made up of. So if you are an elite runner and you're running through 1 million calories, it seems like you are going to use some of that leucine as fuel, 100%.
Yeah. And then if you eat too much protein, it can get stored as fat too. So people always think protein stays in the muscles and that's like that. And then fat stays with the fat. Like your body has the ability to move all of your fuels around. So you can't really trick your body to a certain degree.
Yeah, overall, it's the best just to think of your stomach like a gas tank. And if we went out to the gas station today and we're like, oh, wow, they have gas on sale for 99 cents a gallon. That's awesome. But if your car only holds 12 gallons and you try to put 15 in, it explodes out. And that's kind of how our system is too. Like it could be the most clean, wonderful protein ever, but your body can only absorb so much at one sitting. So if all your stores are full, it's going to go to fat storage.
Yeah. And what is that? What do you say in terms of most protein you should be consuming in like one sitting? Do you have an amount, or is it just per pound body weight? I heard something about 20 grams, like in a shake is kind of like the limit, but what do you think?
So it really depends. Yeah, it depends on how big you are. And so most people can anywhere from 30 to 60 grams. 60 would be those 300-pound guys. But yeah, 20, when you do studies, they see more of a benefit. It's more of the balance between the carb and the protein. If we're talking about after workouts and things where it's a 3-to-1 ratio, if you're getting that balance, then it's actually absorbed much better than if it's just protein or just carbohydrates, because we have different ways that they're absorbed. So if we're having more of the channels opened, then you're going to absorb more and have more of a change in your lean mass.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the ratio again?
3-to-1 carbs to protein.
Post-workout. That's great, because then you're going to get, so it's carbs to protein. So you're getting more carbs to protein. You're going to stimulate insulin, which will put you in the anabolic state, building muscle, and then you get the protein to support it.
Yep.
I like it.
And we've always kind of said 30-minute window, but you still see benefits if you were an hour out or 2 hours out. It's just, it's best the closer you can get it to that workout.
Yeah. And then there's even research on, like, because you're actually moving your muscles, they act more like sponges closer to a workout too, with your carbs, so that you're less likely to get higher blood sugars. Your body is just like absorbing everything and like more sensitive to it during and after workout. Insulin sensitivity. Amazing. Any supplements or any biohacking things that we didn't cover that you're like, can't wait to tell us about?
Oh, wow. Yikes. Put me on the spot.
It's okay if you answer.
I think ours is just really, really limiting the inflammation. So some inflammation is good, but having ridiculous amounts of inflammation can absolutely hinder your performance. So we time it out right, but we're making sure that, there's certain days of the week, depending on when our hardest day is on Sunday, because they play games. So we let them have that inflammation right after the game. If they want to have a food that inflames you more, like fried chicken or something, I'm much more lenient then. But then come Monday morning, Tuesday morning, we're really looking at putting garlic and turmeric and having curry sauces and all the things that are anti-inflammatory foods, having salmon, a lot of omega-3s, so that we can reduce that inflammation, so that not only do we reduce that delayed onset of muscle soreness, but we're also helping get them prepared for the next workouts that are coming up.
Yeah, and you made a really great point. Inflammation is not bad. Inflammation is actually essential, especially if you're trying to put on new muscle. One of the things that I think people, especially weekend warriors, the fault is that they want to avoid DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, so much that they load up on all these anti-inflammatories, or they're just on a million supplements and they don't know that like curcumin is an anti-inflammatory, turmeric, same exact thing, right? And then you have vitamin E. Like we have all these anti-inflammatories available to us, but after a workout and during a workout, you want inflammation. That's like that's when we love inflammation. It's like you want to initiate a change. So if you put too many even like an ice bath right after might not be the best option, because you want to stimulate that hormetic stress response so your body goes in, repairs, and you build your muscles. And that was the entire goal of your workout. If you load on the anti-inflammatories, you're fighting your own self and your body's ability to heal naturally and get the benefits of exercise.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, the day after, it's like, all right, load them on and then you can stagger them, but be smart about it. Cool. Well, that was amazing. I'm so excited because I think that we got so many good bits and pieces here. So I'm excited for everybody to hear about it. How do people find you and learn more about you and your practice?
So my practice is Dietitians of Palm Valley, and we are located in Jacksonville, but we do a lot of online counseling and things like that. And you can find us on Instagram at Dietitians of Palm Valley. You can find us on the web, same address. So pretty easy to find if you just type dietitians is with a T, but other than that, it's pretty easy to find.
Yeah, and we'll put all of the information below in the comments. So there's going to be links there. And Mindy doesn't just work with athletes. The Dietitians of Palm Valley, they work with all people. So you don't have to be an athlete. You can be just interested in performance, or even like interested in, working through disordered eating or your relationship with food. You guys are so well versed in so many different categories, which is why I love chatting with you guys.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have 4 different dietitians and they specialize in different things. So we have some that are autoimmune specialists. We have some that is more of disordered eating and loving your body and finding a happy place there. And I do the sports stuff. So we have a well-diversified group.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.